Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Sulur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a rising junior at Acton Boxborough Regional High School and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I've always been fascinated by the transformative power of technology. In this podcast, we will dive deep into 5 key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll be exploring the realms of cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, as well as the reshoring of manufacturing. These topics hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hello everyone, our guest today is Dinesh Moorjani, co-founder of Tinder, professor, and venture capitalist. Hi, Dinesh.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Hope you're doing well.
I am.
All right. So first off, could you just briefly go over your career thus far for our viewers?
Sure. I'm originally a chemical engineer. I began focusing on building technology companies inside larger organizations and then as independent tech startups. So I've been fortunate to have seen successes and failures. And throughout that career, I had a chance to get to know a lot of investors. I eventually became a venture capitalist. I guess in summary, I've been a serial tech founder, investor, and technology executive. And through that, I brought that together to teach at universities. And I'm currently also getting a doctorate at Stanford, focused on climate engineering.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Array of things, just different things. That's awesome that you've branched out into so many different types of fields. So you're a serial entrepreneur and have built numerous companies, at least one of which is a household name, obviously Tinder. So why pursue a PhD at Stanford?
You know, when I was in high school, I remember like this unrelenting stench of sewage that enveloped the area I was in when I was in a boat floating in this activated sludge at a wastewater treatment facility. And before we had handheld measurements that were automated, I would manually take water samples in this mixed liquor aeration basin, as it was called, during a summer job at a water reclamation facility. And I look back, and we had like limited protective equipment. And, I even wonder if we took the necessary precautions if I were to have fallen out of that boat into the wastewater. But despite the hazard and the inescapably lengthy showers I used to take when I was working there, I was awestruck to see how wastewater entered this plant and then was transformed miraculously into clean, potable water exiting the facility. It was sort of a testament to our human innovation and the ability to sustain our resources on Earth. Today we think of that as the circular economy naturally. And those experiences, along with other motivations, sort of drew me into chemical engineering to tackle, man-made problems decades before the words climate and sustainability were so widely adopted. I designed, solar-powered vehicles to replace internal combustion engines. I built a pulse electric discharge reactor and ran it to break apart, harmful dichlorophenols from water
Could
to
you
metabolize.
go into depth as what that is, please, if that's possible?
The last one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a reactor that allowed us to break apart dichlorophenols, essentially these dangerous carcinogens that are runoffs from factories inside water, to break it apart. So the chlorine could be chlorine ions in the water, and the remaining hydrocarbon could be metabolized by Pseudomonas bacteria. This is effectively a type of soil bacteria. So you could essentially turn hazardous wastewater into potable water and through this experimental process. I've worked on cleaning up benzene spills in a hazmat suit in the summer, um, at polluted oil refineries. So all of these experiences together were pretty formative for me. They from formative experiences in water reclamation, renewable energy, bioremediation, environmental fieldwork. It imprinted a sense of curiosity about our human impact on the planet, and then obviously the adverse consequences of inaction. But in my early 20s, like the realities of student loans and limited financial resources were pretty unforgiving. And I needed to relieve that pressure. So I sought a different path. I spent a career building transformational technology companies. But in that process, I failed to recognize that the most important transformation, it's really our collective disregard for the finite resources we have on Earth and the harm we're doing to Earth's delicate systems and the planet. So I've sort of witnessed these market failures in the mass adoption of sustainable energy and climate technologies that could mitigate the climate crisis that we're facing. So with that background, in 2019, I attended a Harvard Reflective Leader program. I was going back to HBS after having graduated many years earlier, and this experience helped me clarify a lot of my interests towards researching climate change mitigation and continuing to bring about responsible innovations, sort of bringing me back to my roots. And so, hoping to research some systemic solutions to climate change challenges through the lens of the work I was already doing, which is entrepreneurship and in some ways sustainable finance. I ended up applying to doctoral programs, and I was fortunate to begin that journey in an engineering PhD program at Stanford.
Mm-hmm. So that's inspiring how you just changed your direction of your career. So suddenly, through an inspiration of the world changing around you. And you talked to us about the inspiration for your current ventures, getting your PhD and working to help with climate. So what were your other inspirations for your other ventures?
I've had inspirations for a lot of the companies we've built, but maybe just broadening your question a little bit in to talk a little bit more about responsible innovation, which is the focus of my venture capital fund. There's a quote from someone that I look up to, Jared Diamond. He wrote the book Guns, Germs, and Steel. And if I remember the quote, all human societies contain inventive people. It's just that some environments provide more starting material and more favorable conditions for utilizing inventions than do other environments. And if you think about what that means, I mean, it's pretty powerful. Can we create more favorable conditions for everybody so we can unlock innovation around the world? Jared, since he's written Guns, Germs, and Steel, I'd been following him for some time and was really fortunate to meet him a couple years ago. He's now a friend, and unbeknownst to him, he was really a source of inspiration for me for my research, but also just a profound outlook on my life and my desire to tackle global climate challenges by encouraging innovation and creating an environment that would allow it to thrive. My initial research focuses on characterizing causal factors underpinning successful climate technology innovations. But I believe really that the private sector interventions through climate and energy innovation are part of what we need to unlock in order to tackle some of the challenges around the world. But if you broaden, the quote from Jared to other areas of innovation, we really need to create favorable environments so we tap into all of the talent that's out there and not those that only have preferential access perhaps to Silicon Valley. So hopefully that's helpful in thinking through some of the other inspirations I've had.
It is, and it's interesting because I actually had to read an excerpt of Guns, Germs, and Steel for a summer reading a few years ago, I think.
Book.
And the excerpt I read was about how the Spanish came to South America and they just had more resources and more technology than the tribes that were there at the time. And it was just easy for them to overtake them. Mhm. So, getting back on track, what insights have you gleaned as a serial entrepreneur, and especially at Tinder? Did it influence your research interests?
Yeah, I suppose so. After my MBA at Harvard, I began building software companies to solve overlooked yet population scale consequential problems. Um, and one of those problems was, exploring the relationship between behavioral economics and system design. I don't think those two had really come together. Um, and if you could bring those together, what could it unlock? And um, many of the entrepreneurial ventures that occurred and we built inside my company, Hatch Labs. That's where we co-founded Tinder. I examined marketplaces, and specifically, I examined marketplace equilibrium and decision science borrowed from behavioral economics and psychology. My commercial research, if you will, revealed that loss aversion, elevated the fear of rejection, and omission bias highlighted the social cost of failure. Um, these principles really underpin our team's hypothesis around Tinder, which was a double-blind introduction model, a double-blind human introduction model, delivered to the participants of that model through software, lower social inhibition in seeking companionship. And then that, the result of that when you scale it is you can propagate user growth and reach a
Yeah.
marketplace equilibrium. Tinder's organic growth and global proliferation, effectively validated this hypothesis. In many ways, a startup is a hypothesis, and bringing it to market is trying to, in some way, softly prove or disprove the hypothesis, or at least demonstrate whether the hypothesis was valid. Um, Founding Tinder and numerous other startups underscored that this interdisciplinary view on examining a problem, grounded ideally in real research, as opposed to sort of cursory incrementalism, can advance real innovative solutions. And over time, I came to believe that an interdisciplinary approach and examination of incentive mechanics, was needed to advance climate science and the adoption of sustainable technologies. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that today. But all the different hats that I've worn sort of came together to allow me to have the perspective that I have on the current innovation challenges that I'm targeting.
Hmm. So, you guys based your frame of Tinder on research on human emotions, right?
To some extent.
Mhm. So, like we've discussed, you're a serial tech founder and a technology exec, adjunct professor at multiple colleges, and a guest lecturer at the top universities in this country. You're also an institutional investor, nonprofit board director, and many other things. Like, you've done everything. So, it must be hard to be a student again. So, how are you finding it?
I love it. I've always loved learning. I've been intellectually curious my whole life. Of course, uh, there was some trepidation going back to school at this point in my career. Um, I was asking myself questions. Was I still sharp enough to do the math and engineering analysis? Did I have the discipline to study and conduct research for hours daily? I was worried, would I be a pariah among fellow students that were,
Mm-hmm.
maybe younger than me? So I
Yeah.
wanted to excel. And the idea of failure was more daunting than perhaps actually even failing. So in preparation for going to Stanford for the doctorate, I took an advanced calculus course at UCLA to brush up again. Um, I took an engineering course at Stanford over the summer. And having done well in both of those courses, I came to believe that the plasticity in our brains is actually quite remarkable. We can revive our ability to learn um, the way we did as children, or at least that's what I like to believe. So, as I ride my bike to my engineering classes and my research lab, student life feels quite similar to my chemie days at
Yeah.
Northwestern. Although I
Did
spend a
you
meaningful.
not have a car or?
No, I don't keep a car at Stanford, and that's deliberate. I ride a bike. I try to be more eco-friendly. I'm already trying to do what I can with solar at home and driving an EV vehicle, but ultimately I still have a carbon footprint, and it's not perfect, but in any ways I can um, mitigate that. I try to do that. So although I spend a meaningful amount of time, you know, in on campus at Stanford, um, I'm still focused on making responsible innovation investments while I'm still playing with my kids. Um, so I don't have necessarily the typical life of a doctoral student.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, was it really hard for you to get back into the groove at first when you got there? Like being away from it for so long?
Yeah, it was, and part of what I was trying to do was take some engineering classes and that calculus course I took in advance to get back in the groove. It was sort of training wheels, if you will. And after I had done that, I felt I was academically capable. And then it was just a matter of being on campus and fitting in with the norms and understanding what campus life was like. And that came fairly organically.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So after that, I wanted to ask just how do you stay motivated in general to keep doing all the things that you do?
I watch a lot of Star Trek.
Star
No,
Trek.
really, I do. But all joking aside, I guess I'm reminded of a better place. One in which we seek a world where the pursuit of money is no longer the driving force in humanity. Rather, it's the pursuit of knowledge. I am a capitalist. I got my MBA. I run an investment firm, but I'm really focused on the pursuit of knowledge, and that's the driving force behind my research. You know, um, Maybe the other thing that keeps me motivated is, with those aspirations in mind, I think about my two wonderful children and my family. As you might expect, I want them to grow up in a healthy, sustainable world. One that endures without the looming threat of climate change and some of the changes that are already beginning to happen. Where states, firms, and individuals consumes the Earth's resources, with limited regard to the consequences. So if we can create a better world, and I have these little areas of motivation like decompressing over watching Star Trek, it sort of helps me stay focused.
Yeah. And do you really think we'll get to a world where knowledge is just superior, not money?
I don't know. That's a difficult question you're asking. In the fictional show of Star Trek, it took an external force, essentially first contact with alien life or something like that to happen. And I'm not taking a position on that. But it took something remarkable to reorient the human condition. And I'm not sure we've had that level of forcing function to reorient around the pursuit of knowledge um, versus the construct of capitalism that we live within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So circling back to your schooling and what you're currently doing as a student, you're also teaching while you're a student. So what are you teaching and how does that work with your other responsibilities?
Yeah, I've been guest lecturing over the years at Harvard and Stanford, MIT, and other universities. And then I teach regularly at UCLA Anderson's School of Management. This has been over the past 7 years. And at Anderson, I'm a faculty advisor and a senior lecturer in the MBA program where I teach the business creation option. And I introduce students in the MBA program to our core entrepreneurship course. That's Management 295A. It's Entrepreneurship and Venture Initiation. It's called EVI for short. We could probably come up with better vernacular around describing it. But it really borrows from a course I designed and taught at USC for years, University of Southern California. And that course was called Founding and Leading Enduring Startups. And then at UCLA Anderson, I also teach Management 412. It's a course called Technology and Innovation Management. And it's actually a joint program between UCLA Anderson and the National University of Singapore. Teaching provides me with an opportunity to instruct on sustainability case studies to help future technology founders consider tackling climate and sustainability challenges as their core entrepreneurial focus. And then teaching students is invigorating. It keeps me in touch with this generation's concerns, challenges, their aspirations. Fortunately, I'm able to design my schedule to retain my teaching responsibilities while concurrently spending time both in Northern and Southern California. Um, it's possible due to really progressive and helpful advisors at Stanford, the interdisciplinary nature of my research, and frankly, the flexible academic schedule that UCLA Anderson affords me.
Mhm. Nice. So I also noticed that you're on the board of some nonprofits, and is that just a personal interest thing, or is it linked to your research?
It's both. Um, there's a very tangible common thread in my nonprofit work, helping disenfranchised children strive for a better life. I serve on the board of the United Friends of the Children. I believe that's the largest, California or at least Los Angeles nonprofit helping foster youth, and the Organization for Social Media Safety. It's helping educate parents and children about the dangers of social media while trying to be, while trying to responsibly regulate companies delivering social media products into the market. With that sort of similar thread, I've recently joined the board of trustees for University of California, Merced. It's a newest UC serving students, often residing, in less privileged communities, and sometimes in the Central Valley. Ultimately helping the next generation of youth seek out a better life. It's core to my climate and sustainability, focus. In addition to a focus on equity, and I guess my hope for a better future for all of us.
Mm-hmm. It's really important for that next generation to start now, knowing the right principles, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, going back to your work at Tinder, I know you went over it a bit, but could you go more in depth to any operations that you might have missed? Because you've helped revolutionize how people connect. That's a big deal, right?
Yeah. So what specifically would be helpful?
Could you go in depth to how you scaled the company to what it is now? Maybe any insights or customer data that you looked at to help you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So maybe to understand Tinder, it's helpful to understand, um, how Tinder was born. Tinder was born inside Hatch Labs. It was a Delaware C corp that I
Yep.
founded in October 21st, 2010, if I recall the date correctly. I was the founder and CEO of Hatch. Um, we were a company to build companies. So we had our own ideas. In some cases, we had brainstorming sessions and ideas with the product managers that we brought in. But we generally had our own ideas, and we used our own funding to build our own companies, which we owned 100% of, and then would spin out with additional capital, either from one of our investors, which was a public company, or the private capital markets, which could be other VCs or angel investors, for example. And So that was in late 2010. We had been building a number of companies, and by late 2011, I'd hired a really talented engineer in Los Angeles, and then in early Q1, I had hired a gentleman named Sean Rad. He was hired as a product director. Really motivated, really smart, on an incredible product sensibility. And I brought the two of those individuals together, the engineer, Joe and Sean, in February 2012 for our internal hackathon. So we used internal hackathons for, assessing talent from the outside and how they would sort of operate in an appropriate pressure cooker to come up with a new idea and compete on the merits of those ideas. But most of the people in the hackathon were our full-time employees, right? We were just getting them to work on a new project, to keep their juices flowing, to work on something outside of what they were maniacally focused on day to day. And for our team in LA, because we were based in New York City, I asked Joe and Sean, I think I mentioned it to Joe specifically, to utilize this interest graph that he had come up with. And it would need to be refactored, but to take that interest graph and apply it to the social discovery space. And that's what they did. And that was an early product called Matchbox. And with the initial presentations of the hackathon ideas, I awarded them first prize. They were already hired, both Joe and Sean, to work on something else in the local merchant
Mhm.
loyalty space. And I paired them together to go work on that concept. It was called Cardify. And so we took this concept called Matchbox, which is really the precursor to Tinder, put it in an icebox, a proverbial icebox, and we intended to defrost it later. And sure enough, in May 2012, we did exactly that. We were in TechCrunch Disrupt finals on Cardify, but we hadn't been approved in the App Store for the product to be commercially released into public beta. And so we didn't want the team sitting around. And so I asked the team, after checking on their motivations, if they were willing to shift gears from Cardify back to this initial concept of Matchbox, whether we could go work and build out that product, because we thought it was pretty compelling, after giving a lot of thought to the underlying behavioral economics and psychology around the double-blind introduction model over the past 3 months. And the team agreed. So we shifted gears back to Matchbox. I forced a name change. I didn't think Matchbox was the appropriate name. So I got a list of names to react to, and we came up with the name Tinder, which I thought was great. We built the alpha product in about 23 days, if I recall. It was in June of 2012. We dog fooded the product. Then we built a private public beta, which we dog fooded in Hatch Labs. And then we launched the public beta in August 2012. And we iterated from August over the coming months until we saw early indications that even though we had a small user base, we had a heavy amount of usage among those users. We were looking at sessions per day, what the cohort retention would look like, things like that. And these were promising metrics despite, the really small user base. So the question was, if we had a small user base, but they were highly engaged, if we could get it to more users, could this really be a business that solves a real problem around social discovery? And it turns out the total addressable market for social discovery was pretty large.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
bridging that gap seemed plausible, and the natural use case for Tinder had a high viral coefficient. Hopefully it should grow through word of mouth. And we seeded some of the activities that will allow product marketing to work in the fall of 2012. And then it started propagating without bound. And we were fortunate to be part of that story. When we look back, I do worry about the abuse of technology, and certainly social discovery is not the same thing as social media. But we do know lots of people that have met off Tinder, and we know that they've had kids, and we know families, and we still receive testimonials that they wouldn't have met had they not met on Tinder. So it makes us feel pretty good. I think the product and the motivation for using the product has fundamentally changed a lot from the days of when we started it to today. But hopefully that gives you a little window into how we got the business going and how it eventually scaled.
Yep. Yeah, and like you said, you're creating families here. It's like it actually is a real world application that's just spread to so many different families. Even my family, my parents actually met on an online dating site. Not Tinder specifically, it was before that, but they met on an online dating site.
Yeah, it's remarkable how technology can sort of change the course of our lives. We just want to pay a lot of attention to the Black Mirror effects of the abuse of technology, and so that's why I'm really focused on responsible innovation.
Yep, definitely.
It certainly had an impact on large populations on Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going into some of the things that you will be working on, you're kind of focusing on, and trends for the next decade. This podcast is primarily about the trends shaping the future, right? And with your extensive background as a tech founder and venture capitalist, investor, an advisor to so many investment firms, what are some mega trends you see shaping the next decades?
Well, there are some obvious ones. The challenges that we're all facing in climate might be the grand challenge of our lifetime. And when you have a challenge, it creates opportunity. So the trend is to invent the future that can potentially mitigate the climate crisis, that can deal with adaptation, and that we can have technological interventions that could reduce the impact of the anthropogenic emissions or other causes that humans are involved in that are influencing negative consequences on our climate and really Earth's systems more broadly. So that's certainly one trend. Another that's top of the hype cycle is artificial intelligence. I don't want to spend too much time on this because it gets a lot of media attention already, but I would say that there's been dramatic improvements in AI that are going to impact really how we live our lives, and hopefully it's for the better. It's important that we have the necessary guardrails, and that creates trends and opportunities around building companies with those guardrails, where we can advance AI to help the human condition and really help Earth, while not setting us back because it puts us on a dangerous cycle of abusive technology. Those are two of the biggest, most obvious ones that I think companies are spending time on. I think some of the less obvious ones that have been talked about in the past is the advances in biomedical engineering and solutions to modern day medical challenges that we're faced with, where we need a lot of innovation. Diseases like Alzheimer's and challenges with dementia that rip apart families are an area that we need a lot more innovation. And I think there are solutions that are out of the box and not just drug based that are emerging through research that might have a big impact. And then maybe the last area that I'll mention is the idea of compute. Quantum computing really is a fundamental S curve, a new S curve for compute being, kind of the capabilities on a Y parameter over time on the X axis. And with that new S curve, once that's become widespread and adopted in a way that can impact really complex problems and do so efficiently and quickly, I think it's going to unlock a lot of new solutions that we haven't been able to tap in today for some of the challenges that we face in society and on Earth. So those are some of the mega trends that I see. There are others, but maybe I'll highlight those four.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think, especially a lot of the last stuff you said, like Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases, and some of that stuff, it all falls into human longevity, just helping humans be sustainable for longer. And even your climate tech work is somewhat part of that human longevity scope that
I'd say it overlaps
the world is
for sure.
trending to. Yep. So lastly, with your experience in teaching and mentoring, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to make a positive impact on society?
I'd say maybe don't think about from point A to B as a linear journey. I used to always, tell my kids that what's the shortest distance between 2 points? It's not a straight line. It's to sort of bend space. And if you kind of think of it as a nonlinear journey, all the experiences you have are like a layer cake, and they make you better at addressing a path to that next milestone or check-in point, because then there'll be something after that. It's not just getting from point A to B. So I would think about it non-linearly. And, I couldn't be an effective researcher had I not been doing what I did in the private sector. And similarly, I don't think I'd be as an effective venture capitalist as I am without the interrogations that I've done on, the beliefs that I hold and the technology companies I've looked at and the companies I've run. And so I think my research as an academic makes me a better investor. Building companies makes me a better investor. Being an investor makes me a more effective and empathetic founder. Everything advances everything else. And I think having multiple lenses to look through as you form the prism of what you look through makes you more effective. And so on the journey in life, especially building companies, as you're trying to build a positive impact, instead of seeing things necessarily as a distraction or viewing things in a linear way, I think if you recognize that they all add to your collective capabilities, I think it makes you more effective.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. So finally, could you just go through some of your key takeaways from today, from our conversation?
I'd say maybe we'll start with what I ended with, which is don't view life as a linear journey. Embrace the unexpected curveballs and the opportunities that arise, because it'll add more dimensionality to your outlook, and hopefully make you more effective. Um, and then maybe I'd just say that there are a lot of big, exciting opportunities for problems to go tackle, both for entrepreneurs, investors, and generally for all stakeholders in society. And if we can all come together with a positive outlook instead of trying to tear each other down, we'd probably be in a better place in tackling those grand challenges. Um, Hopefully, that's a helpful summary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thanks so much for joining us today, Dinesh. And thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of the Exponential Edge podcast. And tune in next time so that we can go over trends that will see exponential adoption in the future. Bye, Dinesh.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yep.